in the races. I believe there are white people and black people and Hispanics and Asians, and I think that it's a core part of our identity. It's who we are. And there's
white men are scared of nothing more than competition. They don't want to compete on a level playing field. They don't want to have to sit opposite a black guy, a Mexican guy, a Chinese guy, who have got equal qualifications, go in there and say, hey, may the best man win. They want to go in there, hey, this is America, I deserve the job, what are you talking about, I'm an American. They don't want to compete. They don't want a level playing, because the ignorance on display here is palpable. But what I think is really great is this is being directed, this ignorance is being directed towards Candace, and she has a total inability to debunk it.
If you knew what you were made of, then we would save the world.
This one's a little bit behind the times, but heck, I thought I'd tackle it anyway, because I've been meaning to for some time. This is Candace Owens getting her Negro wake-up call. Candace Owens, for the longest time, without prefacing her too much, because I don't really want to, for those who know Candace Owens, you know what she's about. She's essentially kind of like a person who earned her grift through essentially throwing black people under the bus. She's one of these alt-right, or far-right conservatives who has taken on slightly more of a liberal tinge recently because of the way she's been treated, because they essentially, when they didn't need her, they threw her out. She used to work for that Ben Shapiro channel, can't remember the name of it, and I'm not even going to look it up. And then she worked for Turning Point, which is Charlie Kirk's channel, and fell out with them or threw out whatever. She's now doing quite well independently on her podcast as a kind of like a new black female Alex Jones conspiracy grifter. I'm not too concerned about her. I don't like her. Obviously, anyone who kind of shares my complexion probably doesn't like her because of her ignorant views. I think she's learning. She made a lot of rash judgments in her youth, and as she's growing up and she's realizing that actually all of these racist people who she's aligned herself with aren't going to protect her, and she's realized actually these people are the most uneducated, the most ignorant, the most stupid people on the planet. She's realizing that slowly. And so she's trying to kind of like slowly move her way out of that grift into a more balanced liberal space. And it's just funny to see. So this is an interview that she had with Nick Fuentes. And the amazing thing about this video is it really highlights how truly ignorant the right are about history in general. And what's more striking than Nick Fuentes' ignorance is Candace's inability to debunk his ignorance because of how ignorant she is. So it's two stupid people having a conversation about basically something that either of them know very little about, but they both hold tremendous power in terms of the way a lot of people perceive these subjects. And Candace is getting her Negro wake-up call here because Nick Fuentes is essentially sitting in front of her and saying, I think you and everybody who looks like you is stupid, and I think me and everyone who looks like me are just generally smarter, and this has been the case historically. Candace, because she spent her entire life and her entire grift saying racism doesn't exist and it's a cultural problem within the black community that black people need to sort out, and she's taken this completely ahistorical approach where she's refused to pick up a history book and understand that every situation that you see has contributing factors that lead people there, and only a moron approaches a situation without identifying the historical conditions that brought about that condition. However, Candace has never held this position. She's always like, oh, it's, black American culture is the reason why they're here. And she refused to even go 50, 60 years back, and look back at, contributing factors of, Jim Crow's, race riots, segregation, all these things. She's always, oh no, racism doesn't exist, it's in the past. Well, now she's getting a Negro wake-up call. So I want you to watch this and just enjoy, bask, laugh about this conversation they're having, because the ignorance on display here is palpable. But what I think is really great is this is being directed, this ignorance is being directed towards Candace, and she has a total inability to debunk it. So let's just have a watch and enjoy it. I think maybe this interview might be copyrighted or something like that, but we'll see how it goes.
So,
well, I said it to people because I was definitely saying, like, he's got to be a Fed, because what is he doing?
That was part of why I was in particular a little upset towards the middle of the beef.
Okay,
last year.
Fair, but I really did believe it.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to me. I'm like, what am I doing that everybody everywhere is upset?
Towards the middle of the beef. I like it when these far-right commenters casually use Ebonics and African American vernacular English and don't even realize they're using it because of how pervasive it is. But hey, no, they are culturally superior. They don't need it at all, do they?
They call me offensive, controversial. There's only two genders, boys and girls. They can't cancel my message because I'm the biggest. Shut your lame ass up, man.
But anyway, let's carry on.
Interracial marriage. I'm Catholic, so as you know, it's not a sin to be in an interracial marriage or relationship. But I am racist, I would say. I believe.
You know what's hilarious about this? He's the result of an interracial relationship. Okay, he doesn't want to call it interrelationship because his Mexican dad maybe is white passing, but he's literally the result of an interracial relationship, and he's against it. I don't think he realizes how many people do not regard his dad as white. I would say a majority of white America would say your dad's Mexican, he's not white. Mexicans are brown. So you're the result of a brown, and I think his mum's, he might even be Italian or something. You're the result of two immigrants coming together, two fair-skinned immigrants coming together and having you as a kid, and you're sitting there talking about, I don't believe in interracial marriages. Like, you don't even have purity in one generation of purity, my friend. You are literally what a lot of people would call a mongrel, okay? I have two Yoruba parents, okay? My parents have Yoruba parents. Their parents have Yoruba parents, yeah? I am Nigerian, and I'm not saying this as a flex, but I'm saying that if I wanted to make the argument of purity, I could make the argument. Okay, you can't make the argument. You are a mixed breed, okay? And your children will be mixed breeds. Your grandkids will be mixed breeds. They'll have 1/8 Mexican and one bit of Italian. This, that. You are a mix. You are an interracial. You are literally the poster boy of interracialism, and you're sitting there talking about, I don't believe in interracial marriage. And that's because you have to grift yourself onto the white race. Oh, well, I'm not this, I'm white. You're grifting yourself onto the white race, a race that doesn't, by and large, accept your dad. But you're going to grift yourself onto the white race, even though your dad's probably at risk of being deported by ICE. You're going to grift yourself onto the white race just because you share what is a phenotype with them. This is hilarious coping, but anyway, let him carry on, because you'll always find the people who are most akin to racism are the ones that sit on the fringes, tend to be people who aren't actually the most white. It tends to be the ones who really want acceptance into that group called whiteness. They want acceptance into that privilege. They want further separation, and they want the codification of racism, because then pushes them into a privileged position, even though he knows as a Mexican he's a second generation immigrant. He has no rights to the American dream. He has no rights to the American discussion. The American discussion has always taken place between Native Americans, white Americans, and black Americans. Those are the first arrivals. Mexicans, respectfully, you're a first or second generation immigrant. You have no part in this discussion, but this is a way of him shortcutting his way into that legacy, shortcutting his way into rights, shortcutting his way to the top of a pyramid that he doesn't even belong in, by identifying with this American identity and then utilizing his fair complexion to say, I belong in the white American group. And obviously his followers, these groypers, don't even clock on to the fact that he's not American. He's a mix. It's hilarious.
Even the races. I believe there are white people and black people and Hispanics and Asians, and I think that it's a core part of our identity. It's who we are. And there's
So who are you? Because you just said white people and Hispanics, but your name's Fuentes. So you classify yourself as a white person, but you have an Hispanic surname.
like this conservative reflex to say, we're colorblind. Race doesn't mean anything. And, Pat Buchanan said this. He said, it's not everything, but it isn't nothing. And I definitely lean more towards the latter, which is it really is a core part of who we are. Our culture, our heritage, our ancestors.
He keeps saying our culture, our heritage. What part of your culture what is your culture, Nick Fuentes? Is it sombreros? Is it quesadillas? Is it spaghetti? What is your culture? Is it chips? Is it like what is your culture? What are you? Are you a white American of British ancestry, or white? Like, what are you claiming here? Because it seems to me you're just claiming a skin color. That's bizarre. Like, you keep talking about ancestors. Who are your ancestors? Make it clear. Be transparent about where you come from, because all you're clinging on to is whiteness, which is bizarre.
Ancestors or customs, all of it. It's not that I don't think that two people can fall in love from different races. Of course they can. And they have throughout history, and the races have mixed throughout history and assimilated. But for someone like myself, I always say on my show, it's just my value. I want to marry someone that looks like me, that comes from a similar background, because I want my kids to look like me. I want my grandkids to look like me.
But are you...
Okay, but do you look like your parents? Which one of your parents do you look like? Because your dad's Mexican and your mum's Italian. You want your kids to look like you. First of all, do you want your kids to look like you? Because if I was 5'4", whatever your height is, you are, can't even fill out a suit properly. Yeah, I'm sure you want your son to be a strapping young man. I mean, Candace Owens is clearly more of a physical specimen than you are. She looks more of a presence than you do, and she's not even like a particularly large lady. Why exactly do? Anyway, let me put that aside. Okay, let's say you're not lying and you do actually want your kids to look like you. What does that mean? Because you're a little Mexican boy, or little, what exactly is this? Because you're trying to sell. Do you think that you look like a Chad? Do you think that you look like a Dylan? Because you're mixed. You are mixed. You are the result of mixing. This is the bizarre thing about what you're saying.
Sorry, I just want to make sure. Did you say I'm a racialist or I'm a racist?
For a long time I would say I'm racialist. Mm-hmm. Now I just say I'm racist.
Okay.
He closes his eye like this. He can't speak with his eyes open. No, I'm a racist. I'm not sure if I'm a racist or I'm a racialist, bro.
There's nothing remotely in anybody, in any female, that thinks I want to preserve that seed. Those are good genes. No one's looking at Nick and thinking that's good genetic value there, good genetic contribution. I want to have his kid. No one's thinking that. And this is why he has to cling to, this is the most racist white people who have this groupthink, who raise things like, IQ and this, that and the other, and the white superior over the black race. Look at them individually. What you'll find is you'll never meet a 6'4" good looking white guy who talks like this. Okay, what you'll find is they'll be 5'3", living in their mum's basement, never had a girlfriend, don't know how to talk to women, and looking for someone to blame, looking for a group to cling on to. Oh, look what we've achieved at the white race. What have you achieved as an individual? This is where you'll find the archetype. Most racism is rooted in deep-seated dissatisfaction and lack of accomplishment in life, and that's what Nick clearly exhibits. Isn't he a self-confessed virgin? He's like, what the hell? He's like, what, his mid-20s or something like that? Totally unsuccessful with the females. A lot of people are saying that he's gay. I don't think he'd even be successful as a homosexual. Who would want him in any sphere of society? He's totally undesirable, and that's where racism has its appeal, because I can always turn around and say, well, I belong to the superior white race, so therefore I'm better than you. It's hilarious.
So when you say you're racist, mm-hmm. because these definitions get changed around, mm-hmm. racist, anti-Semitism gets expanded. What do you mean when you say I'm a racist? Because I think most people watching this would go, if you are a racist right. in the traditional sense of the term, why are you on this podcast, right? Wouldn't you just go, you know what, Candace is black, and therefore I don't want to speak to her. Right. Certainly not going onto your show and saying, why won't Candace have me on? That doesn't really seem to line up with right. the traditional sense of the idea of racist. So
yeah, and I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek. I mean, for the purpose of understanding, I'd say my views are I'm a racialist. But I do think that we need to deconstruct this idea of racism in the sense that,
And this is the thing. So not too long ago, 1 or 2 generations ago, he wouldn't be accepted into the white race. He's very aware of this. So this clinging onto racism, this desire to advertise himself as a racist, is basically, it's an extreme move to gain acceptance. You know, he has to make a grand gesture in order to be accepted, because people, when they first see him, they're thinking, what the hell, what can this guy offer me? You know, a bunch of white guys, you know what I mean, a bunch of, you know, typical, you know, Aryan guys stood around, you know, blondes and brunettes with blue eyes, tall, and this little weedy 5'4" semi-brown guy comes along, and he's like, hey guys, can I join you? And they're like, you know, they're going to turn around and they're going to look at each other and they're going to be like, what the hell do we need you for? Why are we going to accept you? Look at you. So what he does is he's realized, probably from a young age, that the way you gain acceptance in those circumstances is you take a really extreme position. You say really brash things. Okay, he's basically occupying the same position as an Officer Tatum and a Candace Owens. They're all trying to gain acceptance into a group that doesn't want to accept them, and so they have to take up an extreme position. They have to say things that group doesn't feel comfortable saying, and then they go, oh, you're actually really useful, Nick Fuentes. Yeah, Mr. Fuentes, you're actually quite useful, because amongst ourselves, we can't say the things that you're saying, but you're brave enough to say them. He's like, yeah,
I can say them all. I don't like them dirty Negroes. Yeah, I mean, I really want your acceptance.
And they'll accept him, because he'll do that. And just like Candace Owens will say things that they can't say. And they're all a part of this same grift. But none of it is authentic. None of it is built on their own actual personal value. They're not offering anything valuable. They're not offering, you know, anything of substance. They're not creating better human beings. They're not improving the world. All they're doing is essentially trying to find acceptance, and, you know, in a world that doesn't look upon them favorably. That's all it is.
You know, look, you're black, I'm white. It is what it is. For my entire life, people have been walking around
and you see that oversimplification. You're black, I'm white. It is what it is. Okay, and this is the thing. That's what you want. You want this kind of. You want to turn what is a very complex subject, which is kind of like ethnicity, and you want to turn it into this very simplistic binary thing and create this super group, this white super. I mean, you're Mexican, dude. Like, respectfully, you're Mexican. You come from a mixed, some would say, very dark lineage of people. Okay. That's where you come from. The fact that your dad was a racist, and you don't like to talk about your racist dad, but the fact that your racist dad raised you to be this little angry pink ball of hate, yeah, that's that's neither here nor there. But no, it's not binary. You don't get to go, well, you know, you're white, I'm black, this, that, and the other. It doesn't work that way. Yeah.
and eggshells about the subject of race, about white people being racist. Can I say this? Can I say that? Can I have this opinion? And me, I'm sort of, Gavin McInnes said it like this. He said, you're kind of post-racist. You're sort of after this craze where everything was racist. It's sort of this recognition.
Well, everything was racist. It's not like, after this craze, everything was racist. It wasn't just, black people aren't just complain about the fact that white people use the N-word. It's the fact that they use the N-word to then justify bombing a city. They use the N-word to then justify a race riot. They use the N-word to then justify lynching innocent black people. They use the N-word to then justify killing African presidents, democratically elected African presidents. They use the N-word to then justify occupying land that didn't belong to them. They use the N-word to then justify illegal invasions of other nations. This is what happened. It's not it's not this theoretical thing, oh yeah, everything was racism. But we kind of post that. It's like, no, everything was racist and many things still are racist. There is no post-racism, okay? There are people like you who want to bring back overt racism and bring back overt violence that comes with racism, which is what you ultimately want to do. You want to be able to use that racial excuse to then recolonize and reenact violence upon the domestic black population as well. That's what you want to do. So you will kind of swing in between these pendulums of overt violent racism and less overt violent racism, and you're wanting to swing it back here, and then you want to gaslight the black community and say, oh, you it's post-racist. There's nothing post about racism. Okay, it's something that we are confronted with idiots like you on a daily basis who are obsessed with black people.
In that we live in a heavily racial world, and look, sometimes we have racist feelings like I want to live in a white neighborhood. I don't want to.
Well, that's not a racist feeling. I want to live in a black neighborhood. I would love to live in a developed black neighborhood, which is why I've chosen that I'm going to just end up living in Africa. I've already making those steps. But the bottom line is, yes, I would like to live in an all black neighborhood. I like being surrounded by my people. That's not racist. Okay, you can do that silently. Okay, or live amongst. You don't have to live in a sundown town where people who are of another race are at a risk of being attacked, which is probably what you want. But you can live in a neighborhood that has a majority of white people. That's just that's a standard feature. Now, if you extend that to say that you want to exclude black people from being able to buy in that neighborhood on the basis of them being black, even though there's no statistics to support that, for instance, middle-class black families commit more crime than middle-class white families, because one thing that you never bring up is the socioeconomic factors when you start talking about crime rates, then that's where the issue lies. Because what you do is you create very simplistic arguments based on race, because you yourself are dissatisfied at the fact that you are probably relatively low IQ and you are unsuccessful. So it has to be, well, you've only created success by being racist, so it has to be something to do with race.
Live in a black neighborhood. If they're all like you, obviously it'd be a different story. But when we think of a black neighborhood, we know what that means. And why.
Well, actually, Candace Owens is not an exception. Okay, she's just very typical middle-class black American. When black Americans aren't forced into poverty or don't have their neighborhoods gentrified, don't have their wealth stolen from them, don't have their neighborhoods bombed, didn't have their land stolen from them. When that is the case, and you get black people who are successful, who do build middle-class households, then you'll find that people who are like Candace Owens in terms of levels of articulation, levels of success, she's pretty standard. There's nothing kind of exceptional about the way she presents herself. She's only exceptional to you because you do nothing but peddle negative propaganda about the type of blacks that you choose to focus your attention on, which are the socio-economically repressed blacks who in their behavior are really no different than the socio-economically repressed whites. Okay, poor blacks and poor whites have exactly the same levels of behavior, probably exactly the same crime rates, exactly the same drug usage. Nothing different there. They're exactly the same. The only difference between white America and black America is that white America has a smaller proportion of poor people. That's the only difference. Socioeconomically, as you move up the ladder, the behavior gets better, the outputs get better, the level of intellectualism gets better, everything gets better. It's nothing to do with race and everything to do with the history that you don't want to address, America's history that you like to ignore and conveniently say, well, everyone just ended up here. Everyone just ended up here. You know, if you look at the Senate, 98% white males. Well, that's just how it fell. That's just how the chips fell. You know, because white people were just no. Let's just ignore the fact that you literally had laws saying black people couldn't take these positions. You literally had, just over 100 years ago, managed to get rid of slavery. Then after that you had Jim Crow, and then you were literally lynching and torching the towns of black people. Like this is, you can't just erase all of that history and then claim, well, this is just how the chips fell. It's not how the chips fell, because this is what you're fighting against. You're fighting against competition. What all of these laws that have been put in place in America, and they're not even that extreme because America is still the most racist nation on the planet, but the laws that make it so that white people have to compete with black people, you call racism. So affirmative action and DEI laws, which make it more competitive, because essentially it forces via regulation people to not have racist hiring practices and actually to consider, not just throw out the applications of white black people, which is what used to happen. And this has been proven in study after study, that people with black American surnames won't even get a look in, and yet you'll make the argument that the best person should get the job, but black people's applications wouldn't even get looked at for a lot of positions. And it's only via actual regulation that you can get a resolution to this injustice, you'll try and remove that and call it racism, because you are ultimately scared of competition. That's what you're scared of. You're scared of having to compete. White men are scared of nothing more. And when I say white men, I mean white men like Nick Fuentes, not white men in general. But white men are scared of nothing more than competition. They don't want to compete on a level playing field. They don't want to have to sit opposite a black guy, a Mexican guy, a Chinese guy, you know, who have got equal qualifications, go in there and say, hey, may the best man win. They want to go in there, hey, this is America. I deserve the job. What are you talking about? I'm an American. They don't want to compete. They don't want a level playing field.
By the property value.
But that's Black American. So this is why I want to understand this idea better, because, and this is kind of something my cousin has said, which I guess you could say is a racist statement, but she says that white people in America are the white trash of white people in the world.
Facts, by the way. White people in America are definitely white. By the way, white people in America are, this is not spoken about enough, are the convicts of the world. We speak about convicts being shipped to Australia, okay? But it was exactly the same process for the Americas as well. This is why the white people in America and the white people in Australia have very similar backstories in terms of the way they treated the natives when they got there, have got very similar histories of violence, which their offspring have inherited, are very, very, you know, violently racist and adamantly against the populations they move into, because it wasn't the best of the best that came from England and got onto those ships. Actually, no, they used to ship convicts to both of these continents. I know they were separated by several hundred years, but it was the same process. You can see it was people who were convicts who were literally captured from the streets of England, who were then taken in ships across to the Americas. And the same thing happened a couple hundred years later in the Australias. Okay, convicts, white convicts, who ended up essentially being, you know, the founders, or at least the invaders of these nations. Okay, so this is the backstory. This is who these nations have inherited, and this is why essentially you get the rednecks of the world, or the poor white trash of the world, ended up with the most power in the Americas. Okay, and this is why they're so violent. And I wouldn't say the behavior of Europeans is exponentially less racist or exponentially better, because they still have their issues, but there's definitely a clear difference in class of Western Europeans versus Americans, and English versus Australians. There's definitely a slight there's a difference in the general behavior, and that's because of the class of the people that were shipped to those nations. That's a part of history that they don't like to acknowledge, but it remains true.
Meaning that, like, there's a special category of uniquely that you don't see when you're dealing with, like, white Americans here, that if you went across to, like Switzerland, you wouldn't see this version of a white person necessarily, or this, you maybe went to the continent of Africa, you don't see this version of a black person.
And so she's coping a little bit when she's saying this. This is her, once again, not being able to just stand on business. She has to placate, you know, Nick Fuentes' racism here. So he's kind of like, well, you know, white Americans aren't like Europeans, and black Americans aren't like Africans. So what she's trying to do is she's trying to paint the picture that Africans are better than black Americans and Europeans are better than Americans, and she just missing the whole point. She didn't need to make that point. She could have just made the point. But this is linked to her not knowing history, which is why she wasn't able to make that point with a lot of chest. She could have just said, yes, in the poor sector of black America, you get, you know, by and large, poor behavior. Okay, but once again, I keep saying that those behaviors are linked to socioeconomics. Okay, they're linked to and it's linked to poverty. Okay, and it doesn't. There's nothing exceptionally poor about the behavior in black neighborhoods in comparison to poor white neighborhoods. It's just that they like to shine a torchlight on the black neighborhoods that are poor. So if you want to resolve the poor behavior, it's not like Candace is like, oh, it's a culture thing because they listen to too much hippity hop and the hip hop makes them kill each other. It's nothing to do. Just solve the socioeconomic issues. Okay, you solve the socioeconomic issue. You remove the inequality. You allow them to get jobs when they need to get jobs. You remove the barriers. You remove the redlining. You remove all of these things that have kept certain sects of America poor. And you allow them to move, you know, to make progress economically. I remember in 2008, a lot of people, this is a part of history that they're just kind of like painted over and no one even talks about anymore, was the amount of black people in America that lost their homes through foreclosure. Like it was loads, and it was exponentially, the rate at which black people lost their homes was exponentially higher than the rate at which white Americans were losing their homes. And the reason why black Americans were losing their homes to foreclosure is because they'd been given these mortgages that were exponentially worse rate than the mortgages that were being offered to white people. So when the crunch came and the interest rates went up, loads and loads of black people lost their homes, like loads of black people. So we had a whole swath of middle class people pushed right back into poverty again because they've lost their homes. That doesn't happen by accident. Okay, these are banks making decided decisions based purely on the race of the individual making the application, what rate they're going to give them, and giving them poor. And it was either that. It's not like they're being given it's not like they're being given a whole buffet of offers, mortgage offers, and they're taking the offer they can get. So that's normally the best offer that they would have got. And if you take a white person with identical income, they're being given much more competitive rates, which meant they survived the credit crunch and they survived their house being foreclosed. This is just one of an infinite number of ways in which many black American societies have been kept poor. And obviously I can extrapolate this and I could talk about Africa, but I don't really want to go into the full details of, African leaders being removed. Congo, the poorest nation in the world, had a leader that they elected, okay, in the 1960s in Patrice Lumumba, who had already put in policies that was going to make sure Congo could compete. And before he could even light that fire in Congo and set that nation ablaze, they took him out. The CIA took him out. In the CIA, in cooperation with the Belgian authorities, captured him, put him to death on camera in front of the whole world via firing squad, dismembered his body and put it in acid or something like that. And I think his skull was sent somewhere. I think they just about sent his skull back to his family. This is how disgusting these people are. This is what they do. And then they turn around and go, well, look, like Nick will, I'm sure, do, oh, look at Africa. Look at Africa. Oh my God, look at Africa. Well, if you take out our democratically elected leaders, which you've done in many nations, Thomas Sankara, Toure is another one, Kwame Nkrumah is another one. The amount of African leaders, good African leaders, that you've taken out because you didn't want them to develop their nations, and then to look back with a complete lack of respect for history and just go, oh, well, how comes there's no developed African nations? Because you doing your best. Libya was a developed African nation. Okay, it was a very developed African nation, and now it's a nation that is sitting at the bottom. Okay, it's very much a third world nation now. It's corrupt, it's disgusting, but hey, America's really rich, and all of those good white people are very rich off the back of the suffering of the average Libyan. And you've done that you've managed to reverse Libya from being an amazing nation into the pit, almost like hell, within 15 years. It took you 15 years to do that, to take a literal paradise of a nation and to plunge it into hell. You did that in 15 years, you good white people,
Like, even if you went to the tribes out in Africa that still exist, they would be a far cry from a black American living in a neighborhood in Compton, right? So I'm trying to understand if you think that it's all black people are like this, or if your world is kind of colored by, this is what's going on in America, this has failed for 1,000 reasons, welfareism has definitely, black people in 1940s, stand up. My grandfather, I talk about that denigration and the corrosion of culture. Yeah. That's happening. White, black, whatever you want to name it, there is this intentional corrosion of culture.
And this is her grift. Oh, corrosion of culture. Like, this is just her not wanting to admit that racism exists. Oh, we know it's just deliberate, left and right, corrosion of culture, this, that, and the other. Yeah, it's racism, Candace, okay? It's racism, all right? Black Americans didn't just suddenly come out of segregation in this nosedive because they were low IQ, which is kind of an argument you've kind of argued towards, because they are, in your view, they are in control of that culture, and they chose a culture that was self-destructive. That was the argument that you made, and you're not willing to rescind that argument. And as a result of not willing to rescind that argument, you're now going to be made to look like a fool. But the reality is, none of this was a choice, okay? This was external forces continually placing belligerent pressure upon those cultures, upon the black culture, taking over things that were black ownership, excluding black people from being able to have economic power in certain areas. That's what created that. It's the same phenomenon we see in Africa, okay? But you're not willing to admit that it's racism because in your view, racism doesn't exist. I just wanted to kind of like touch on this discussion that Candace Owens had with Nick Fuentes. And basically, to me, this conversation is just kind of like the chickens coming home to roost. When you spend your whole life disparaging people, that's going to come back, especially your own people, it's going to come back to bite you in the arse in conversations like this, where you're trying to have a reasonable conversation with an individual and he has zero respect for you because you've had zero respect for your own people. So I just find it quite interesting. What do you think of this discussion? I know I rambled a lot, but put your comments in the let's have a discussion about some of these things that we talked about today. Peace.
If you knew what you were made of, then we would say